we can get you guys on your way um, on time. Couple things. A few of you, and it's nobody that's in the chat right now, so this is addressed to people that aren't here actually, but there are a few of you who have submitted assignments, but you've submitted blank papers. I can't grade them if you just submit a blank document or you submit a document that just has the questions and not your answers. So some of you are wondering, hey, I turned in this assignment and I still don't have a grade for it, or it still says a Z. The reason it still says a Z is because when I received it and I opened it up to grade, it was either just the questions or it was a blank document. So please go back and check if you think there's an assignment that you've turned in and you think you don't understand why you didn't get a grade for it, or more specifically why your grade is a Z. Please check your submission and make sure that you have submitted a version with the answers on it. I know a couple people, Charlie in particular, emailed me and said that sometimes that happens if you're working on the app on your phone, that there's an extra step you have to do in order to submit the document that you've written answers on. So if that is in fact you, please double check and make sure that everything you've turned in has the answers on it, because otherwise I'm just going to send it back to you and it's going to remain as Z in the grade book until that happens, until it gets fixed. Okay, otherwise keep up with this week's assignments. Remember that Sunday night's assignment, the AP classroom assignment, that one closes out. Okay, so those multiple choice review questions, those are going to close out Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. So those are, those multiple choice assignments you are not going to want to ignore and think that you can turn those in late. The other assignments, it is still set to accept a late submission, but the AP Classroom multiple choice questions for units 1, 2, and 3, that one is going to close out, okay? Thank you to those of you who've already completed the test day assignment. So far, nobody has contacted me that they've had any major issues. I had one student reach out to me that said that they couldn't log into their College Board account, and I was able to give them the phone number so that they could call the College Board and reset their password, which they were able to do, and then they were able to get in. Also, some people, despite the fact that the College Board said that they would send those admission tickets for your exam out 48 hours before the test, some people have been getting them early. So they have been already sending some of them out. Your exam day is still May the 21st. That hasn't changed. I know the College Board said you wouldn't get your ticket until 48 hours before, but apparently they've lied and they've been sending them out early. Because I had somebody message me in a panic on Wednesday afternoon and said, is our exam on Friday? I already got my ticket. Okay, no. The exam day has not changed. It remains May 21st at 2 p.m. So don't think that because you've already gotten your ticket that your exam day is now 48 hours from now. It is not. And make sure that you're getting a separate ticket for all of your AP exams. So like those of you that are in AP Psychology, or those of you that are in another AP class, AP Spanish or AP Music Theory or whatever, remember that you should be getting a separate email with a separate ticket for each exam, okay? And I bring this up because I know some exams are starting next week. I don't know if you guys have an exam next week, but I know that some of them will be starting up next week. So this process should be moving forward. And again, the good thing is because our exam is so much later, we'll have the benefit of seeing what kinds of problems and things other people have had with the other tests leading up to that, which is good. So we can kind of troubleshoot. But other than that, nobody has messaged me yet that they've had a major tech issue with getting through the practice test, which is good. Okay. One of the things that I noticed when I took the practice test is that in the box where you copy and paste, you have to paste something. So you can't just type in that box. Okay. So you can't just decide that you're going to write your whole response in that box. I don't know why, but it makes you paste text into that box. You actually will be forced to use a Word document or a Google Doc or whatever. You can't simply type in that box. I noticed that when I did the practice exam and when I was going through it, just to see what worked and what didn't. And then I also took it one time and I let the timer run out just to see what would happen. And once that timer runs out, like the box that says submit, like you can't click it anymore. It goes like a grayish color and you can't click it anymore. So it is pretty, I mean, it does lock itself down after that. Okay. So just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention as well. And so what it's going to look like in the days and weeks coming up. So today is our last lesson for Unit 6. It's on migration. And then that's it for exam topics, which means our lessons next week are going to be all about writing the DBQ for the exam and what you need to do, and some strategies like how to maximize your points in the time given. I'm going to show you a couple of different strategies. There's one strategy that you may choose to use where you can get a score of 8 out of 10 and only use 2 of the 5 documents. That is possible. And so I'll kind of walk you through some of the different strategies. Ultimately, of course, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you which, if any, of these strategies you choose to use. But I am going to try to give you some tips and some tricks on how to maximize your points in otherwise what is a very, very short exam. Also, College Board is doing an AP World History review session tonight, and I have to say, World History this year got the shaft, and I'll explain why. Every year for all of their AP classes, they do a review session with somebody who's kind of famous, somebody who is well known, kind of comes in and helps run that session. The AP World review session that is taking place tonight is with Jeb Bush. He used to be the governor of Florida. He's George W. Bush's younger brother. He was who they got for AP World. Now, the reason I said that you guys got the shaft is because did anybody happen to see who did the review session for AP US History? Anybody know? No? AP US History had Lin-Manuel Miranda do their review session. And we got Jeb. So unfortunately, we did kind of get a bit of the shaft on that one. It's not fair because, I don't know, it's just not nearly as exciting. God, you guys are quiet. It's just, to me, not nearly as exciting as getting Lynn. Oh, there's people in the chat. Let's see. Yes, I agree. It's not fair. Yes. We get Jeb. Sorry, guys. It's unfortunate. But yeah, AP US History, they had Lin-Manuel Miranda do theirs, unfortunately. Here, I'll show you. Anyway, all right, so what we're gonna do next week in terms of assignments, what I was saying is what we're doing next week in terms of assignments, it's gonna be pretty short next week because what we're doing is I'm giving you one practice DBQ to write, a five document DBQ, and then I'm giving you the review questions for the last 3 units, for units 4, 5, and 6. So the multiple choice questions on AP Classroom, and then that's it next week. And with the DBQs next week, I'm going to try to grade them as they come in, so that I can get you feedback before the test. Okay, so the goal is I want to try to get you your feedback quickly so that you kind of know how you're doing. And so what I will advise you to do with that DBQ is just like this week, I would advise you to set a timer so that you can simulate the exam conditions as best you can, okay, because you're certainly going to want to try to maximize the amount of time, okay? So that's certainly something that I would advise you to do. So next week is going to be kind of a lighter week. That way you can still get that done. Okay, I found the review session with Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm going to post the link because they put it up on their YouTube page. So I'm going to post the link in the chat right now. So if anybody Yes, Jorge, you do get a separate ticket for each AP test, okay? How many AP classes are you in, Jorge? Two. So yeah, so you're gonna get one for this class and one for your other AP class, okay? Depending on when your other exam is. I got two emails with the same AP ID. Okay, yes, so your AP ID doesn't change. What's important is that in each of those emails, Jorge, there is a link, a separate link. So one of them will be a link for your AP World exam, and the other one, when you click that link, it'll be for whatever your other AP exam is. Okay, so your AP ID number itself might not change, but the link in that email is going to be different for each AP exam. Okay. What is the AP ID? That's not the same as the e-ticket. So the two separate emails Jorge got are two separate e-tickets. The AP ID is like your student ID number, but it's for AP. But the separate emails that you're getting are each going to have a separate e-ticket in them. So I'm guessing, and I haven't seen Jorge's emails, but I'm guessing one of them is his e-ticket for AP World, and one of them is his e-ticket for the other exam. And then he has to click, I don't see a link for a test. Okay, Jorge, can you do me a favor, and I'll take a look at it later. Can you forward to me the email that you got? Because I can't really help you until I see what it is that you're looking at. So forward me the email, and then after class is over, I'll take a look at it and I'll post something on the Teams page, just in case other people have the same question. Because I don't want to keep guessing about what's in the email until I actually see it. Okay, so just send it to me, and then Emily, I think I'll be able to answer your question about the difference between AP ID and an e-ticket once I see what this email is that he's talking about. Okay, so let's hold off on those questions just until I'm able to get a better look at it, because I think I'll be able to answer your questions a bit more accurately. Okay, so like I said, next week is going to be a very short week. It's just going to be the 3 multiple choice practices and then 1 DBQ, one final practice round. And then the week of your exam, there's not going to be any written assignments or anything that you have to turn in that week. It's just going to be prepping for your test. Okay, looking things over, getting everything organized. You know, the only assignment I might give you would be something where I would tell you just to get your notes organized or have everything labeled or in order so that you can flip through things quickly. But there won't be anything to turn in that week. All right, so that's where we're headed. Let's go ahead and get through this lesson on migration, which should go pretty quickly because some of it, see, there's the Lin-Manuel Miranda thing, because some of it is stuff that we did last week or right before we left school, okay? So this should at least seem somewhat familiar to you. Okay, so we're going to first be talking today about environmental factors that may have contributed to immigration during this time period. So we've been building up to this, right? And we've been talking about this new age of imperialism and this new age of empires. We've talked about what's changed over time and how it compares to the last wave of empires and what has remained kind of the same. And so now we're going to look at what some of those environmental factors were that would have contributed to migration, okay, whether voluntary or not, during this time period, okay? And we know some of these cases, some of the migration is brought about by changes in demographic, okay? And that's going to happen both in your industrialized and your unindustrialized societies, and how those changes altered people's patterns of living, okay? Meaning how these demographic changes, the movement of new ethnic groups, how that has altered the way people lived, okay? And so we open with this shot of San Francisco right around the year 1900, okay? And this is, I know I've showed you this particular picture before, but remember that San Francisco represented at the time, and still does, one of the largest ethnic enclaves in the world, in that they have a very thriving and a very large Chinatown. Okay, so they have a very large Chinese American population. Okay, and so we also know that better transportation plays a role in this as well. Okay, railroads and steamships are going to allow large groups of people to be moved from place to place much faster and much more efficiently. And one of the things that I just noticed about the railroad this morning, I didn't see this when I copied this particular picture, but did you notice there's a girl who appears to be standing on the front of the train? I just noticed that today, incidentally. But yes, she appears to be catching a ride on the front of the train. Okay, so again, this is what we're looking at, environmental factors first, that would have contributed to this movement of immigration. Okay, and so we have to think about the fact that many people chose to migrate voluntarily. Okay, at the beginning of this time period, 1750, we're still in the height of the slave era. Okay, but of course, as we move out of that and we creep up closer and closer to 1900, we move away from slavery, and we're starting to see a lot more of the voluntary migration. Okay, and so yes, at least initially, we start with coerced labor, okay, slavery, but also we have what's called semi-coerced labor. Semi-coerced labor is going to be things like indentured servants, as well as things like convict labor. Convict labor was this idea that they decided that part of a prison sentence, if you were sentenced to jail, part of that prison sentence was going to be that you had to serve so many years of what they called hard labor. Okay, so that's what that was. Okay, and so that's semi-coerced labor. You weren't paid for that. It was considered to be part of your prison sentence. Okay, and so it's during this period that you are going to see a major shift in the migratory patterns, because you're going to see a movement away from the coerced labor like slavery into semi-coerced labor like indentured servitude and also prison labor. And then eventually, near the tail end of this period, you're going to see the major voluntary migrations happening. So you're going to see the Chinese move into the west coast of the United States. You're going to see groups like the Irish and the Italians move into the east coast of the United States. Okay, and so this is all tying together. It's all connected, right? Okay, and so we have these trans-oceanic empires. We're seeing a movement towards global capitalism. Okay, all of these things are beginning to tie together or tie back together. Okay, so why did people move in the first place? Okay, some of it was, in fact, most of it was because of work. Okay, in 1848, when gold was discovered in the west coast of the United States, lots of people headed west as quickly as they could because there were jobs there. Okay, lots of Chinese migrated in because there was work. Okay, you see a lot of Indian and also Chinese laborers come to the United States because they could perform manual labor and they were willing to do so cheaply. Okay, and so these are part of the reasons, okay, why you're seeing all of this. Okay, now most of these migrants at this point tended to be male for reasons that we've talked about before, right? This is still a society where the labor force is male dominated. And so a lot of these men would leave behind, if they were married, they would leave behind their wives and their families, okay, to go do this work. The hope was that they were sending money back and then eventually bringing their family over. But then there were also a lot of young single men who made these migrations, again, because of the work, okay, because of the jobs. And so what they create in these new societies are what are called ethnic enclaves. An ethnic enclave is something like Chinatown or Little Italy or Little Havana, where you have a large group of people from a particular ethnic group living in a sort of consolidated area. Okay? And so in that area, they are living amongst many of their own people, which means it's acceptable to continue speaking their own language. Okay, they can keep much of their old culture. Okay, and it's also comforting for people to kind of hold on to some of the ideas of the old, the old country or the old ways. Okay, and so you see that a lot. I've already mentioned a few of those examples for you. Okay, but notice it's not just in the United States. Okay, we're going to see an example of Indians moving into Africa, okay, a little bit later today as well. So there are examples that certainly exist outside of the United States. Now, again, with the Chinese, okay, a lot of the, one of the reasons that they come here is because they work cheaply. Okay, it was a cheap source of labor. And so you start to see the Chinese migrations right after the Civil War, when these southern plantations can no longer employ slave labor. They need to find a cheap source of labor elsewhere. And so these Chinese laborers were willing to work very cheaply. Now, not for free, obviously, okay, but notice the date of this particular painting, 1871. So this is about 8 years or so after slavery ends, okay, and this is in Louisiana on a sugar plantation. Now, I bring that up, okay, because this very obviously would have been a plantation that 8 years ago would have been employing slave labor, and now they are employing a very cheap form of Chinese labor. Okay, so that's going to be one of the main impetuses behind Chinese migration during this time period. Mika just asked if that's a dog. Let me go back and see. Yes, that does in fact look like it's a dog. Okay, so very, very quickly, I'm not going to go through all these because I know your friend Mr. Bogar taught you about all this in AP Human Geography. Okay, but we know that there are push factors, which are things that are pushing people away from a reason. So push factor is a reason that you would leave a particular area. Okay, it could be things like environmental factors. Okay, the weather is usually something that causes people to leave. Okay, some people leave because the weather's too hot. Some people leave because the weather's too cold. Okay, pollution. Lots of people like to leave cities because they want to breathe in that cleaner air. Okay, illness. When you're living in a city and people are on top of each other, sickness and illness can spread much faster. And ironically enough, I think we're certainly seeing that play out now. There is a reason why this illness has spread much faster in large cities than it has out in the country, because these people are, very much right on top of each other. There's, a lot more area, a lot more space, a lot more hosts for the virus to spread that way. And so I suspect, that the virus after this is over will be a push factor that might push people who were previously living in the cities to want to move out of the cities. Okay. And so again, I'm not going to go on long about the pull factors either, but the pull factors are things that would pull you into an area, okay, things that would attract you. So this is why you go somewhere. Push factors are why you leave. Pull factors are why you go somewhere. And again, some of them are going to overlap, okay? Weather for some people is a push factor. It's why they leave an area, but it's also a pull factor. It's why some people come into an area, okay? Some people leave Florida because the weather's too hot. Some people come here because they want the warmer weather, okay? So there's, a certain amount of overlap between push and pull factors, okay? Some other examples of pull factors might be human related. This could be how many jobs there are available. Okay, for example, Las Vegas has a lot of pull factors because there's a lot of work that is available there. There's lots of jobs there. Central Florida, one of our biggest pull factors, again, is the availability of work and of jobs. Okay. And then you have what are called ideological factors. These are going to be things like religious freedom. Okay, so maybe think about the Pilgrims. Okay, they left Great Britain because they were not able to practice their religion. Okay, and they were kind of shipped out to the New World. And so the New World, with the idea of religious freedom, that was a pull factor for them. Okay. Now, you have a very specific push factor, which is called forced migration. This is when you get literally kicked out, okay? And so forced migration is when people have no choice, okay, but they are pushed out of an area, okay? For example, are the Europeans taking slaves out of Africa? That is a forced migration, okay? When the Jews were expelled out of Spain or later on expelled out of Germany, okay, those are forced migrations, okay? When the United States forced, Native Americans to continue to migrate further and further west on the Trail of Tears, those are forced migrations, okay? A forced migration is a type of migration that is based on a particular form of persecution. Okay, so these people are being persecuted either for their ethnic identity because they were Black in the case of the slaves, because of religion in the case of the Jews, okay, because of ethnicity in the case of the Native Americans. Okay, so it's always based on some specific type of a persecution. Okay, and so if you look, okay, at this list, which I'm not going to go through every single one on here, okay, we have some different examples of some of the different migrations that took place in this time period, okay? And so we know, obviously, slavery is an example of a mass migration. That is a forced migration, okay? And that would be a continuity. But if we're talking about changes, we know that using indentured servants, that is a change, okay? Using convict labor, that is also a change, okay? Now, we also know one of the other factors fueling this change is going to be, obviously, there's more food available, okay? And so there is an increase in the population. As the population grows, okay, we talk about agriculture getting better. We talk about medicine getting better, which means these people are living longer. As these things are happening, the population's getting larger. They need to find somewhere to put these people, okay? Your population is increasing when the birth rate is higher than the death rate, which means you have more new people coming into a population than you do people dying. Okay, and so when that happens and you have a net gain of people, you need to find somewhere to put them. Okay, and so this chart right here kind of illustrates for you some of the different forms of labor as it relates to the United States. Okay, and so like we've talked about the Chinese, okay, coming over here because they were cheap labor. And because of the gold rush and the building of the railroads, they represented a cheap source of labor. Okay, we do see some of the seasonal or the temporary migrations over here. Okay, as well as slavery. That is an example of coerced labor. And then, if you recall and think back to how Americans responded, for example, to the Chinese, we know that they created a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was, as I've mentioned to you back when we were in school, this is a completely racist law, okay, and was designed to sort of limit or in some cases prohibit the Chinese from coming to the United States. Australia enacts a similar policy called the White Australia Policy, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well, okay? All right. So again, we know why the Chinese came here. We know that it was cheap labor, okay? And you can see that they worked both in the gold rush, that's them over here on the left, as well as on the plantations in the south. I don't know what's in those sacks. If I had to guess, I would say that it's probably sugar, okay? But that is a guess, okay? And so this map right here, and I know at least at first glance it seems kind of annoying to read, okay, but this map shows us where these indentured servants were coming from and where they were going. And so it's no typo, it's no mistake that a lot of these indentured servants are going to places that were previously staffed by slaves. So if you look at the Chinese heading over here into the Caribbean, okay, we know that prior to the abolition of slavery, all of the work on the sugarcane plantations and in the rum distilleries, etc. All of that work was done by slaves. Okay, and so as we're seeing a decline in the migration of the Africans, notice, look how small that arrow is coming out of Africa. Okay, and that's because by 1863, slavery is outlawed. Okay, we start to see these workers and these migrants coming from Asia. Okay, and they're no longer working for free. They are now working for a very, very much reduced wage. Okay, but still a wage, nevertheless. Okay. And so here's another map showing you the same thing. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at it, but the same thing. Notice where you see a lot of these migrations originating in, okay? And it is Asia at this point. So the hub for migration is shifting out of Africa and now over into Asia, okay? And this chart here, here is another representation of the same thing. Okay, take a look at how many people left India and went to British Guiana, or went to Trinidad, or went somewhere else in the Caribbean. Okay, and same thing down here with China. Look at how many people left China and went to Peru, okay, or went to Cuba or the Caribbean. Okay, so you can see that Indian and Chinese migrants, okay, are sort of taking the place of the former African slaves, okay? And so again, if this is something that comes up as a topic, okay, or something that you're having to write about, this is absolutely something that you could identify as a change that has happened. You are seeing the labor source shift away from African slaves into Chinese and Indian indentured servants. That is certainly a change that you could write about, okay? All right, so what else is happening here? Okay, let's talk about that. We know then that some of these societies, okay, are not going to be quick, or in some cases at all, interested in embracing these new ethnic groups. And so they are going to respond in such a way that tries to regulate their migration. Okay, and I give you the example of the Chinese Exclusion Act and the White Australia policy. Okay, and so if we take a look at these two drawings here, okay, you'll see, again, notice this is, okay, if you look down here, we see the Chinese must go. This is supposed to be San Francisco back here, and notice that the Chinese are being chased out of San Francisco, okay? Again, they're trying to get them out. Same thing over here. We have a wall being built to try to keep the Chinese out, right? It is ironic that this cartoon comes from the 1800s and it's talking about building a wall, okay? Like we say, oftentimes say, history repeats itself, okay? But this wall was figurative. It wasn't a real wall, and it was designed obviously figuratively to keep the Chinese out. This wall represents, of course, the Chinese Exclusion Act, okay? Which was supposed to be a bill that would keep Chinese immigrants out of the United States, okay? Here we have Uncle Sam, in this case, quite literally kicking the Chinese out, okay, of the United States. Now, this is the second cartoon where we see something called Magic Washer, okay? One of the things that the Chinese did, are one of the things that they had to do when they came over here and they found it hard to find work, is they had to establish and run their own businesses, right? That was the only way, okay, that they were going to survive, because nobody would hire them. And so a lot of them started laundry businesses, okay? And so that's why you see Uncle Sam, whoops, well, you see it here, okay, with the Missouri steam washer, and then you see it again here. Here's the Magic Washer detergent as he's kicking out the Chinese, okay? And then here, take a look in this cartoon, also showing the same thing, okay? This is that Chinese wall again, and so notice all of the different things that are making up that wall that is designed to keep the Chinese out, okay? This one here says laws against race. We've got jealousy, we've got low wages, we've got competition, we've got fear, on American. So these are all the things that are being used to build the wall to keep the Chinese out, okay? And then if we look across the water, notice here, this is representing China. Notice that their wall is broken and that you have the Chinese coming across by the ship full, okay? Or by the boat full, okay? Okay, so let's think of an example now outside of the United States. I want to give you an example of this outside of the United States. Yes, the Chinese were supposed to pay for that wall, exactly right. But let's think of an example outside of the United States. And we're going to go into South America, into the country of Guyana, which is just up here in the north central part of South America. Now, Guyana, excuse me, has a population right now that is approximately 30% Hindu, okay? Why on earth is that, okay? Why is almost a third of their population Hindu, when they're, many thousands of miles away from Southeast Asia where you see that? Why is that the case, okay? What causes that? Well, couple of reasons. During this era of migrations, okay, notice that we are seeing a lot of Hindus coming over here. And so while almost all of South America is that purple color, which represents Roman Catholics, okay, if you look closely, notice that you do see stuck in there, okay, you see some Hindus coming over, okay? So they did come over here. Why did they choose Guyana? Why is that? Okay, well, couple things to keep in mind. Even today, the country of Guyana has the largest Hindu population in the entire Western Hemisphere. That means that there are more Hindus living in Guyana per capita than there are in the United States. Okay, 35% of the United States population certainly is not Hindu. Okay, but in Guyana, it is. Okay, and so what happens is in 1833, when the British abolished slavery, a good 30 years before we did, the British needed labor in their colonies. And so who did they begin to recruit? They began to recruit people from India, okay? And they began to recruit these very cheap, a very cheap labor source of these Indians, and they began to encourage them to come to Guyana to work on these farms, to work on these plantations, okay? Most of them came over as indentured servants, which means that they worked for a set period of time until they paid off their debt, and then they were free, okay? And they could then work on the farm for making a small wage, but still a wage nevertheless, okay? And so if you look, during about this 80 or so year period, almost 85 years, 341,600 people came over, okay? That's a large scale migration, okay? And so that's one of the reasons why we can explain why Hinduism is so prominent or so significant in the country of Guyana. Now, there were some Christian missionaries, of course, and so they did try to convert them. It didn't work. Okay, they had very, very little success with that, and so most of these people did remain Hinduism and remain Hindi rather to this very, very day. And so these are pictures out of Guyana today, and you can see they continue to have a very large and very thriving Hindi population. Okay, and so these are all native-born South Americans who are practicing Hindus. Okay, even to this day. And so basically, one of the reasons why the missionaries were so unsuccessful is that as those missionaries are in there trying to convert these people, the Hindus that are living there, okay, decided that if we're going to keep these people Hindu, we have to change the caste system. And so what they did is they started giving spiritual rights, which means that they, started loosening a lot of the requirements of the caste system. And they basically said, it doesn't matter what your caste is, you can still attain spiritual purity, okay? You can still reach what they call nirvana, that sort of top level of spiritual purity. And once they allowed them to do that, regardless of their caste, that was it for the caste system. And so the caste system broke down there. And even to this day, the Hindus that live there don't follow any kind of a caste system. Okay, it still does not exist. And so I think that's a very important reason why Hinduism was able to thrive. Okay, another reason, another reason is that Hinduism there, okay, became and took on a much more monotheistic slant than traditional Hinduism. And so these conversions to Christianity very much slowed because Hinduism in some ways began to mirror Christianity. It became more monotheistic. They began to worship images the same way that the Christians would worship, you know, the saints or the Virgin Mary or a statue of Jesus, okay? And so all of that came to be more and more acceptable. And so these people did not see any reason to convert or to change religions. And so again, even today within Guyana, you have a Hindu temple like this one, okay? There also in Guyana today, there is a monument, and that's it right there. It's a statue depicting the arrival of the Hindus, of the Indians within Guyana. Okay, and it was a gift from the Indian government to the country of Guyana, depicting the friendship between the two nations. You know, the fact that the Indians were very much welcome there. Okay, and so this statue, which still very much exists today, is there as a symbol of the welcoming and the friendship between India and Guyana. Okay, and so you can see we've got these native-born Indians here arriving in the country of Guyana for the first time. Now, in the United States, okay, so shifting gears now to the United States, as we begin to wind this down, we're seeing, okay, I think this graph makes it pretty clear, large-scale Irish migration to the United States between 1845 and 1855 or so. Okay, we see a huge shift in the numbers of Irish immigrants coming to the United States, okay, as well as Italians coming to the United States as well. Italy is going to happen a little bit later, okay, but we do see the two biggest ones here are going to be, here we go, here's Italy, Irish and then Italian. Okay, notice that the East Coast, the mid-Atlantic, is where many of these groups, both Irish and Italian, end up settling. Okay, and New York City still has a very large and very thriving Italian-American community. It's called Little Italy. If you're ever looking for good food, this is the place to go. Okay, 100% in terms of the food. Okay, and so as we wind this down, I'm going to leave you. We're going to kind of finish up with this chart today. Okay, looking at some of the continuities and some of the changes in the global migration that happens. Okay, and so you can see there's a separate set of changes that happened before 1750, and then another set of changes happening afterwards. Okay, this is a chart that you'll certainly want to look back over a little bit later, but you can see before 1750, our big change is who or rather where the indentured servants are going and where they are from, and then the settling that is taking place, whereas afterwards we're seeing indentured servants that are coming from Asia as opposed to coming from Europe. Okay, we're seeing before 1750 migration being driven by mercantilism and cash crops. Afterwards, it's being driven by industrialization and by urbanization. Okay, obviously the abolition of the slave trade is going to lead to the need for these cheap labor sources. Now, the continuities, okay, the things that have remained the same, these ethnic groups are still being exploited. The Western powers, the Western Europeans and the Americans are still the primary beneficiaries, okay? Men are still primarily the ones leaving, and then things like environmental factors are still driving a lot of this migration, okay? And then we know, of course, also syncretism is still taking place, or still was taking place on a very large scale. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end. And so I'll go ahead and stop now. And I'll ask what your questions are, if you have any questions. Any questions at all about any of that? No? Okay. So I will post all of this for you. I'll post the PowerPoint as well. And then, like I said, if you're continuing to work on that demo exam and you run into any technical troubles, please make sure that you let me know so that I can assist you. Okay. You know, any other problems with your homework or anything, you can reach me on Teams. You can reach me on Remind, wherever. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. So make sure if you enjoyed this video that you like, share, subscribe, click that bell icon, because as Jorge has just reminded me, the road to 1 million starts today. All right, so guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you again on Monday. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.